every year I seem to put a lot of effort into organising a conference to get a load of people in a room to hear some great talks where I get the joy of standing up and summarising those talks at the end of it, so I have to pay attention. I also recognise that I am stood between yourselves and beer, potentially some of it free at the King's Head, so I will try and keep this to the point. But I hope that what you've seen today is two things. One, it turns out that the group of people organising this conference are getting better at it. We're actually putting more people in the room. Things are a bit slicker. I'm learning to use Eventbrite, and hopefully you're seeing that come through in what we're doing. What I really hope you're seeing as well is we're able to put people in a room and really drive really diverse discussions and bring ideas to the surface, which, you know, I don't think you see a lot of that in a lot of conferences. And so I hope you appreciate that, and you know, we can kind of continue the momentum behind this. We'll grow it, we'll get momentum, and we'll provide value in the future. So just a quick synopsis of the kind of scrawly notes I've put in my notebook, because I think we've seen lots today, and I hope all of it kind of came to the core mission of what we're trying to do in the room as part of this series. So Harry, you stepped in at the start, a real geochemical focused talk, but I hope what you saw there was how you can take data that you're collecting well, you have to collect that data well, but how you can start to add real value to that data by pulling information out of that data that you hadn't thought about, and to then take that information back into how you understand the deposit you're working on. And in particular, I kind of put in some notes here, and I don't know whether you said this, Harry, but it kind of came through in my head. You know, that very much you talked about going back and forward between a data-centered view of the world and a spatial view of the world as well. And having to go back and forward between those two views is really important. When we collect this data, we can look at it on a bivariate plot, but we also have to see spatially where that information sits as well, and go back and forward lots to understand what it is you're looking at. The question was a good one, Joe. You know, how do we move from there into a world of multivariate statistics, and how do we bring those two worlds together? But then what does that look like into machine learning? And I think, or into the world of AI, you know, and I think, you know, what Harry showed was you can start to provide different techniques and start to get stuff out of the data. Do you want to put your own model on the data, or do you want the data to tell you something about what it's doing? But you have to go back and forth between those two worlds. And if you rely on one thing without the other, if you rely on the data without understanding what the rocks are telling you, you will get it wrong. Okay. Oh, and it was a nice use of iGas. Thanks. Martin, really good. I love the idea of a technology now that tries to bridge two, you know, very big silos of our industry, the silo of discovery versus the silo of production, and making a bridge between those. And you're right, data and information has been really poor at going from one silo to the next, and how you can bring sensors into that environment to start to enhance or increase, what was the word you used, the data richness or the data density, and to improve that, and try and get that data richness and data density moving throughout that project life cycle. And I think that's really important to see. Now, there's a few really good takeaways in what you showed, which are a bit scary, but reality. It was 10 years from idea to commercial prototype. And actually, I looked at it, Martin, and it was, you know, I looked at what was now a scalable company, and I thought 2008 was when an idea emerged out of a university. 2026, we start to see conversations around deploying that technology onto mine sites in a scalable way. It's not just mining projects that take a while to get going. Innovation, that is innovation, actually, that's idea to innovation. But technology has also got a long lead time in our industry. And so those two things go hand in hand a little bit. But yeah, that all-body knowledge at the mining edge was really, really good to see. And I like the idea of, I think I wrote down, you're developing a mining production limbs system as well, which I quite like that idea. And then, Jack, I think you may have mentioned IMDEX a bit in your talk. What Jack failed to point out was that it's not a hard invite to accept from them to go and visit, because it turns out that Ellen is also the Brewdog Brewery location, and it's a great place to go and sample the beers. Technology versus industry collaboration, that came through in what Jack showed, right? And he showed it in two ways. One is, we've got a bunch of rocks here. We need to do what we can to understand those rocks. Let's work with the technology partners to see what works. And some of it does, some of it doesn't. Some of it's interesting, some of it's not scalable. That's fine. Let's try a bunch of things and work together to put systems in place that are going to give us value. And he showed what they were starting to do there. I think one of the really important things there was the team on that site, and the fact that part of that technology collaboration is also a really important education piece for the young geologists coming into the industry. You know, they get exposed to all this wonderful stuff. And you know, from my point of view as a technology company, there's a really important, and I know many people in here share my viewpoint, you know, I will put a lot of my time aside to mentoring and training the new generation, because they are the ones that have to take this industry forward. And so that's a really important part of that collaboration. There was lots of things I wrote there. I did like the tool about using the PXRF to relog the core, and the difference between a mapping tool rather than an assay tool. And I think that was a really important point as well, is that sometimes you can utilize a technology for one outcome, a mapping tool. It doesn't necessarily replace your lab assays, but it's going to provide a different context to what you're collecting, and knowing why you're collecting it. What's the end question you're trying to answer? So I think there were some really important points I took out of that. And the use of the geophysics, really pushing that geophysics, surface geophysics and the borehole geophysics, to see how we can bring those data sets together. John, really a great talk around highlighting, you know, again, one of the core missions of this conference has been, how do we utilize data earlier, or data to information earlier in our projects to add value? And John, you know, your examples there were so good in terms of really showing that detailed geometallurgical or mineralogical thinking so much earlier provides you the platform to make proper decisions that allow you to add value to your deposit, or actually make decisions where you step back, or make a decision where you're not going to progress something forward. And that is also a value add. And I like the phrase around you mine and process mineralogy. It's not just about assays, it's actually about mineralogy. And I think many of us forget that sometimes. And so understanding mineralogy far earlier. So you need to know this information before writing the checks. That was a phrase I wrote down. You know, mineralogy is a key data set. That the physical nature of it, the mineralogical, the chemical nature, are all about understanding, and that has to be earlier in the project to drive your decision making and to drive how you progress that project to fruition. And you know, and I think that then led really nicely, Merlin, into yours, because it was then, what are we trying to do? And I think I wrote something down at the end, and it, you know, explore or discover with the end game in mind. You know, and again, I think that connection between, you know, the rocks, the geology, and the economics. You know, for those of us that are in the trade, we trained as economic geologists. We sometimes forget that there are two disciplines bolted together. And so that having that end piece in mind is so critical to the way you make decisions. And still, it is about the rocks and what do the rocks tell you, but you've got to understand what it is you're trying to do, because you're right, at the end of the day, the value is about making money, because that's what we have to do. Otherwise, we're not a charity. I like that. We're not a charity. So I think it was really important to explore with the end in mind, that getting us to think as well about a market-based view of our industry, and also those supply and demand fundamentals as well. Again, things that you can forget when you get caught up in the details of the rocks. And connecting those two different scales are so important. And so, you know, it's the socio-economic reality overlaid on the rocks. We all love going out there and seeing the rocks, but we have to have that socio-economic reality overlaid onto what we do. And if we really understand that whole piece, then we, again, can move through those processes in a far more streamlined and productive way. So yeah, it was about growth, momentum, and value, and those three words are really important. And so I hope what you've seen there is a set of 5 talks that have taken us from some detail through to a kind of almost a market-based assessment of our industry. All of it with the key message that we need to think harder about the kind of information, data richness, data density earlier in our projects to make far better decisions that lead to value. So I think there was a sort of even with those diverse talks, I hope what you see is there's a kind of a common thread that links everything that was said today together. And luckily, it all sits squarely in the mission that we had when we designed and drove this conference forward. And this is now the 5th one. And I think we're starting to get in our stride now, which is quite good. So please thank me and thank everyone here and thank the speakers for bringing this together and making it happen. One of the key things for the group that organised this, we do it at our own time. Well, I tell IMDEX I'm doing it at my own time. But we do it on our own time, and we absolutely committed to keeping this as a free event because we want to put people in the room with no barrier to sit here and drive discussion and get really good conversations going. That's really important to us. This is the 5th one. Can't believe that, actually. That's amazing. And we do record all the talks, and with permission from the speakers afterwards, we make those available through a YouTube channel. So I'm learning Eventbrite, I'm learning YouTube. You can see where I'm going. The free nature of this conference is only possible by sponsors. And so you can see the sponsors on the list. James, you talked about them this morning, and I can't, I just thank everyone who's put some resources into this conference for making that happen and keeping it free, because that's really important to us. I think Todd mentioned if anyone is keen or thinks they would like to sponsor next year, please let us know. We are going to try and be ahead of the game next year. Is that correct? Yeah. Sure. So we'll see how that goes, but please let us know. We are sort of getting in our stride around this. And thanks for the support of everyone turning up and being part of this. Now, there is just before we finish off, just a reminder that after this event, there is a mining sundowner. I don't know how we're doing for time. Yeah, that starts at 5. The mining sundowner is King's Head, just around a couple of blocks away around the corner. Alfred H. Knight and IMDEX are sponsoring that, so there will be a few free beers available to start with at least. So please come along and let's take what we've learned today, the momentum and enthusiasm into that room and have some more of these conversations. So last thing, thank you speakers. Thank you all for turning up and doing this. It's been a real pleasure and a joy this year to see this coming together, and hopefully you've enjoyed what you've heard. So thanks again, everyone in the room.